Hey everybody, welcome back to One Seed, One World. I've got quite the pile of mulch here to work with, and got me thinking that maybe we should do a quick video on why you should use mulch in your garden, the benefits of it, and also in the second part of this video we'll go over different types of mulch that you can use. So let's get at it. Okay, so let's talk about some of the benefits of what mulch can do for your garden and why you should use it. So number one, mulch works as a protector of moisture in your garden. If you just have plain topsoil, especially if you're in a drought, the moisture tends to kind of evaporate fairly quickly up out of the soil as you get those hot summer days. And the ground becomes more hard and compacted as the moisture goes, and you kind of have to keep up with watering a lot more if you're not getting rain. So by putting a layer of mulch down, that one helps absorb and hold moisture and cools the soil by holding that moisture in, and helps prevent it from evaporating out of your soil so that it stays down and gets to the roots of your plants where it should be. And you will have to water less often because most of the types of mulch that you use will hold on to that water longer, so you can do less watering. So it helps conserve water as well. Number two, and this is an important one, is that it acts as a weed barrier. You know, weeds not only are a pain because you constantly have to go in and weed your garden to keep it looking nice, but weeds that grow up a lot are going to steal nutrients from your plants. And by putting a layer of mulch on, it's going to prevent those weeds from popping up constantly. It will slow their growth. And so you can put a layer over the soil, kind of put it around your plants, and that will help protect your plants from getting overrun by weeds and make a lot less work for you. Number three is that mulch over time will compost down and add nutrients back into the soil. And that composting process will also help aerate your soil. Earthworms and other things like that also work in the soil and keep it loose and aerated for you. Love composting material like mulch. And so as it breaks down, not only is it going to add those nutrients back in that your plants can use, it's also going to keep that soil lighter and fluffier so that the plants that you want to grow will have an easier time with their roots expanding and absorbing the nutrients. And one final one is that using mulch can help reduce erosion. Now, if you're growing in a raised bed or like in a garden box or something like that, you might not have problems with erosion. Although like my boxes kind of slope downhill. I didn't level them, like dig down and make them a level box. I kind of put them with the slope of my property. So sometimes I could have problems with when we got a hard rain, that soil at the upper end of the bed will kind of head towards the back end of the bed. And so by putting a layer of mulch on that, I prevent that from happening. And so especially if you're growing, in the ground on a sloped property, on a hill, or, whatever your case may be, adding mulch will reduce problems that you may have with the soil that you want to keep in your garden from washing someplace else. It will help hold kind of everything together for you. Okay, now that we talked about some of the benefits of what mulch can do for you in your garden, let's talk about what kinds of mulch you can use. And we'll kind of start from the very basics and kind of work our way up. So, the most basic thing you could use is grass clippings. Now, if you want to use grass clippings, you will want to dry the grass first, or have it mostly dry. If you put fresh cut grass clippings on it, there's a lot of moisture in there, and it also tends to decompose or break down very quickly. And that composting process is going to put off a lot of excess heat that might not be good for your plants. So if you're using grass clippings, try to avoid doing it when it's like fresh cut. Now I know some people do that, but it can cause some problems. Grass breaks down very quickly, and so you will have to add additional layers throughout the season. Also, you don't want to use any type of grass that has been sprayed with like herbicides or weed killer or that kind of thing. Make sure you know where your grass is coming from. That also worked in the 60s. Anyway, we're going for organic here, so you don't want to use stuff that's got spray on it, because you don't want that in your vegetables that you're going to be eating. Second one that you could use would be hay or straw. Both of those work very well. They break down quickly, so again, you're going to have to use, put on different layers throughout the year. But straw especially has a lot of good aeration in it. It lets a lot of good airflow through the soil, but works just as well for all of the initial benefits that we talked about earlier. Now, with both the grass one and then hay and straw, you want to be careful that you don't get stuff that has too many seeds in it, because a lot of times, whether it's grass clippings or hay or straw, it can have a lot of weed seeds, and then you might actually be compounding a weed problem in your garden. So just be careful of that, make sure it's clean. And then again, also with the hay and straw, make sure that you don't have anything that's had herbicide sprayed on it, because that can again cause a lot more problems in your plants. Another type of mulch that you can use is pine needles. Pine needles is very good at helping at stopping erosion, because they tend to stay still even in heavy rains. However, the one thing that you have to be careful of when using pine needles is that they can raise the acidity of your soil and change your pH. So if you have plants that don't like a high acidity, then pine needles might not be your best bet. But it can be an option for certain types of plants. Works well around blueberries or even rhododendrons, to give you some examples of higher acidic loving plants. But it's another option. Just be careful of it with a lot of your vegetables. Next option would be just using dry leaves. You can add a layer of leaves to your garden and use it as a cheap version of mulch. Again, make sure it's not a tree that's been sprayed. And also, it's better if you can chop up the leaves first. If they get, if you're using full whole leaves, they get wet. Sometimes they get a little compacted and heavy, and you don't want to add that necessarily to your soil. So if you can chop them up first with run over them with your mower and then rake them up and add those chopped leaves in, they'll work much better that way. Also, they will break down quickly, and so you would need to add additional layers throughout the season. And also with leaves, you again have to be careful of adding additional seeds to your garden, because say like for a maple tree, you might be raking up all those little helicopters and just adding a lot of maple seeds to your garden that will then start popping up. So just kind of be careful when you're using the leaf option. Then the final one would be bark and wood chips. There's lots of different versions of this, like the one that I showed you at the beginning of this video that's a shredded natural mulch. In that case, they shred it down more fine, it's soft, it's kind of fluffy, and it breaks down quicker. Although it's normally good for a whole season before you'd have to replace it. It does break down slower than some of the other options that we already talked about. But it's easy to work with than, like say bigger chunks. And that is the second option, is you can get just big wood chips and add them to your garden as well. And they just will break down much slower and maybe last you a couple of seasons. Although sometimes it's best to maybe rake some of them out before putting on a new layer the following season. So with any of these options that you're using, how much should you put on? Normally the best route is probably to go about 2 to 3 inches of mulch. That will work well for all the benefits that we talked about without adding too much weight and compaction. If you pile stuff up too high, it can cause some other issues with compacting the soil, and that's not what we're going here for. So if you kind of shoot for a 2 or 3 inch depth with your mulch, you should be good on keeping that moisture in, preventing erosion, stopping weeds, and all the other things that we talked about. So whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, I hope it's working out fantastic for you, and I hope you found this information helpful and that you're adding some mulch to your garden. But Thanks for hanging out again with me again today, and we will see you again soon. Namaste.